Hi everyone, and welcome to the Author's Journey, bringing you stories of authors in our community. My name is Mony and I'm your host. And today I have with me a very interesting author who's also a publicist who has published well over 10 books in a category which I don't think a lot of people would necessarily appreciate right off the bat, and that is trivia. Together with Mark Tierney, he makes up the team that's called the Trivia Guys, and they have published many books. The most recent one of which we are going to speak about today. So, Randy Ray, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I feel like calling you Randy the Trivia Guy. Tell me, Randy, how did you get started in this whole world of writing and trivia and such?
Well, we could spend an hour talking about that.
We only have a half, though.
We have a half. That's right. I'll be quick. So I'm a former newspaper reporter.
Okay.
You know, I spent 13 years with the London Free Press, and I went to Ryerson and U of T and took journalism at Ryerson.
Okay.
And always covered everything in my illustrious career with the London Free Press. Got sent to Ottawa to cover Parliament Hill.
Okay.
And just before I got sent here, Mark Carney, his name's Carney, Mark Carney, who's in London,
Kearney. Okay.
Also a London Free Press reporter formerly.
Yes.
We got this idea to start writing. We're both music freaks, really.
Okay.
So it all started not with trivia, but with music. So we wrote a Canadian music column, which we self-syndicated across the country.
Okay. How many years ago was this?
This was 1986. The column started September. The first story was about Motherload, a band that has some London, Ontario connections. Anyway, so how that happened was Mark was at my cottage. One day we're on the beach, and he shows me a copy of Rolling Stone magazine. And he says, look at what they're doing. They are doing Where Are They Now stories about American bands like the Young Rascals, the Grassroots, etc. What we should consider doing a Canadian column. So we did. We launched that column. Ran for 3 years all over Canada. Probably appeared in about 25 papers, but regularly every week in 7 papers. Oh, wow. Including the London Free Press. So that ran its course, and we turned that into a bit of a book, which we can talk about later, self-published. Yeah. And then we were looking for another freelance opportunity, so we started a trivia column called, well, it had various names, It's a Fact. And anyway, it appeared in a bunch of papers, Toronto Star, occasionally the Sun, the Citizen, all over the place. Maybe not the Citizen. And anyway, so just like the music book, we end up getting back then there was no internet, no computers, right?
Right.
So a filing cabinet full of material. What are you going to do with it? You say book.
Okay.
So we wrote 8 books that are trivia history related.
Yeah. Well, what is it specifically about trivia? Whether it's in music, whether it's Canadiana, what is it about trivia specifically that appeals to you?
Well, the thing is, when we first started writing the trivia columns, Trivial Pursuit was a hot game.
Okay, that's
very
true.
hot. A lot of people made a lot of money on that.
Yeah.
Not me. And so we just thought, well, here is a freelance writing opportunity, because I was with the Free Press. I was making money, a salary, and Mark at that point I think had left the paper. But we're always looking for other things to do. So, and if you can make a bit of money on the side. So at that point, trivia just fit. It was something we could take advantage of and have some fun with. But you're right. Earlier, before we started talking, you said trivia is not taken seriously. It isn't. But when for example, the Globe and Mail, even though this book right here
the Great
was
Canadian.
on the Globe and Mail bestseller list in 1999 for 5 weeks, they wouldn't touch it with a review.
Why is that?
Because trivia is not, when you see the word trivia in a title, even though it isn't in that book title,
right,
it's not taken seriously. Trivia is
trivial,
it's
right?
Trivial.
It almost has that.
But our books are not like that. If you look at them, it's not a game of Trivial Pursuit. We ask a question and we give a very detailed answer. So I prefer to call our books trivia/history books.
Okay.
And so why trivia? Why we got into that? We were reporters, right? But we were newspaper reporters. You're curious. You think of something and you want the darn answer to it, and you don't. It's like a dog with a bone. We don't stop until we get the answer. And so the whole goal of all of these books, including the new one, you want someone to read the book and you want them to say, "I didn't know that." And we hear that all the time with our books. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
So we write about Canada in a trivial format, but
Right.
we're just as serious about Canadian history as anybody else.
Right, because I did read through your latest book, which we're going to talk about, and it is very intensive. It's not as if it's who this person and then a very brief paragraph. Yeah. There is a lot of information.
So it's not a game of Trivial Pursuit.
No.
They're serious. That's right.
It is history. It is very research intensive. So that's something that you're right. There is a lot more to it than just simply trivia, as you say. Now let's talk about your most recent book, which is As the Years Go By. Yep. Yes. So what inspired that particular book? You mentioned that you had been. Is it because of the column that you were writing?
Well, no, it's not actually. There's two parts to the story.
Okay.
Two parts to the story. Part one is when I grew up in Scarborough, Ontario, in Toronto.
Yeah.
Went to, like most people in that era, you had high school dances, church dances, community center dances.
That's right.
Once you were of age, you hit the downtown bars, the Generator, the Chimney, Docks Pub. So I grew up with a lot of the bands that are in the book.
So are you a music aficionado? Do you love music?
Well, aficionado is a bit strong, but you could call me that if you like. I'm also a wannabe drummer.
Okay.
But I have drums in my townhouse, and you don't always play them because it ticks off the neighbors. But anyway, so developed this love for music. So I danced with the woman who would become my wife under the basketball nets in the high school to these live bands, right?
Yeah.
So you sort of developed the music. You bought their records, in the old days for $2.99 at Zeller's or Kresge's.
That's right.
So part that, the music's there, part that, then I go through and become a writer, a reporter. And it just seemed obvious or natural at some point that if we were going to do some freelance work, we would consider music. And then Mark comes up with this Rolling Stone idea. They're doing Americans, nobody's doing Canadians, so we launched the column.
And how did you find Mark? Was he just a childhood
buddy? No, at the Free Press, London Free Press.
Together.
We're both young lads at the Free Press, rookie reporters in the old days.
Okay.
The late 70s.
So I have to ask you this. What was the first concert that you actually remember attending? The first ever concert you remember attending?
Well, it would probably be at my high school, and it was a band called the Christopher Edward Campaign at Wexford Collegiate. But that's the first. That was a dance. But the real biggie that was Deep Purple at the Rock Pile in Toronto.
Okay.
And the Doobie Brothers at Massey Hall.
I do remember the Doobie Brothers because that does come from my generation, from my generation as well. Yeah. So. All your books, and not just this most recent one, are very research intensive, as we talked about. How is it that you're able to get so much content and find all of these people? Because I imagine a lot of these books were written before the age of just Google, where you could just Google everybody, right?
Yeah, that point has to be made. When we wrote these books, you didn't click on something and so let's say you were saying, why is the Canadian flag red and white, or what's the history of the Canadian flag? You didn't go to your computer and push a button. You actually went to a library. Remember libraries?
I do.
So when I worked at Parliament Hill, the Parliamentary Library was an incredible resource.
Okay.
But being reporters, we go back to that dogged determination. But let's talk about the music book for a second.
Yeah.
So when we were first writing that, the whole idea was build a list of contacts, and every writer does this now. So one thing would lead to another. So you'd meet a guy, say like Richard Patterson of the Esquires, the late Richard Patterson, who worked at CBC. I talked to him and I'd say, I'm going to do a story about your band. So he tells me the story. By the way, do you know where anybody in the 5-man electrical band is from Ottawa? So he gives me the name. And what about this band, that band? So from him, I probably got the names of about 30 bands. And then out of those 30 bands, when you do an interview, you would say, well, do you know where so-and-so is? And so the ball just gets rolling. And then we would also go to trade music unions, phone them up, say, do you know where Ken Tobias is, or so-and-so, George Oliver, the Mandela, and it was just basic reporting in those days. It wasn't click and find.
That's a lot of work, and then, but as you say, this is being journalists yourselves, being reporters themselves. This is like getting a great story, and then say, okay, let's just see how we can flesh this out completely. Yeah. So, how many hours do you figure it takes to write each one of these books?
Well, one book would take about a year, but the music book was different.
How long did the music book take you to read, to research?
Well, you got to remember, we wrote all these columns in the 80s, and we just updated them, so it's not a good one. But let's say, like this book here, the Great Canadian Book of Lists, that would have taken about a year.
And where do you get your information? Like, honestly, did you say just the library, just going and saying, I'm going to research lists?
Very proud to say that the music book, we interviewed, there's 150 separate stories in there.
Yep.
Musicians, solo in bands, producers, promoters. We talked to them all. So now I have to clarify, a band like Lighthouse has 12 members. We didn't talk to all 12 members.
Right.
But if there's anything in that book, any band, any individual person, we talked to a member or two of each group. So personal interviews.
Personal interviews.
Yeah, personal interviews. And now back to the other stuff. So Mark and I are a great team. Some authors might think working together at writing might be like a bad marriage, fighting all the time. But no, we get along great. We come up with a list of ideas we're going to do in a book, and then we divide it in half. He's more artsy than I am. He would rather do stuff about movies.
Right.
I would do more hockey, business, politics than him. So it always works perfectly. We come up with the list, we divide it in half, and then we go at it.
Okay.
And then we compare our stories, and there's a little bit of bickering about, I don't like that, you did too much work, but generally it always works out really well.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm part one of a duo, and with my husband,
there's a challenge.
That's definitely a challenge. Yeah. We come up with the ideas together, and we try to divide the work, but it doesn't end up being that way. It ends up being like a collaboration where one person writes, another person contributes, and it's a continual negotiation. Yeah. It's a continual negotiation of, okay, what's going to go in this book? I don't agree with that. I think this is better. Did you go through the same kind of thing?
Yeah, but in the bottom line is it always works for us. We've written 10 books together, and we've never had a major dispute.
And you're still friends after all these years.
Very close friends. Yeah, very close.
And
friends.
I'm happy to say I'm still married after having gone through 4 books with my own husband.
That's good.
But it does definitely, these kinds of situations definitely test your friendships, And I'll say one of the things that I know that has helped for any aspiring authors who are working in partnerships is this, for us anyways, is this idea that it's not about me or him, it's about the story.
Yeah.
What story are you trying to tell, and which perspective is going to actually support the story that you're going to be writing about?
That's true. But from a process point of view, I think when you work as a team, what you have to understand is that there has to be this underlying rule, unwritten rule that you don't even talk about, that if you do too much work here, the other person, they just know that if I ask you to do a bit more work, you'll do it to even things out without asking a question. You don't complain to the other guy. You don't say, why you just know it's your turn to do more work, and you do it. That keeps the bickering at a minimum.
Yeah, well, you're very fortunate to have found a partner, a writing partner, who you're able to have this kind of seamless relationship with. And, obviously this is a relationship that you've had over many, many years to be able to get to that level of he reads your mind
40
almost.
years almost. It's ridiculous.
That's really good. I want to continue this conversation with you. We do have to take a quick break.
Okay.
So please stay tuned, everyone, as we continue our conversation with Randy Ray of the Trivia Guys. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Author's Journey, where I'm continuing my intriguing conversation with Randy Ray, who makes up one of the duo that is the Trivia Guys, who have written 10 different books related to different aspects of Canadian trivia. And specifically today, we're talking about his latest book, which is As the Years Go By, about all the bands that are in Canada. And I must admit, when I read through the book, I was amazed at the number of bands. Like, I will admit, most of them I did not recognize who they were. I was not in that Canadian music scene as much as you were, obviously, but I had no idea of the talent that exists in this country and just how many bands were out there.
Well,
Truly.
It's unbelievable. I think one of the things in the book that we like to point out, we like to amaze people a little bit, as we discussed earlier, is that, Canadians, I guess on a more general theme, Canadians have left their mark all over the world. I don't know how many people know that, this is going back a bit, and it may not be your era, but a member of the Young Rascals is from Ottawa. They did a song called Good Lovin' and a bunch of good songs. And then a member of the Mamas and Papas, you probably know that, Denny Doherty, which is one of my favorite interviews.
Is that why is that? Why was he one of your favorite interviews?
Well,
what happened there?
I mean, wow. The Mamas and Papas were a huge band for a couple of years. I mean, massive, and they struggled like most bands in New York, and coffee scene and all that, and then suddenly, bingo, they hit it. And then went to L.A. and Doherty met John Lennon. He talked. I mean, just the stories, the names he dropped, unbelievable stories, and then how the band broke up. And that was that band. There was a lot of social interaction between members, which you can't talk about on a family TV show. Yes. But that was one of my best interviews. But you're asking me about themes.
Yeah, I'd like to know, because obviously you're speaking to a lot of people, a lot of musicians, and I'm sure that there are people who are watching this who aspire also to be musicians one day in their lives, and they look at these people and they go, wow, not only have they made it, but they must have so many different stories and perspectives to share.
Well,
so
that's a really good question. Excuse me, because this book really is aimed at the 50-plus crowd, because they remember these bands. If you're 22 years old, you've never heard of half the bands in this book. But the thing is, if you're a drummer, bass player, or whatever, and you're coming up the pipe with a band, and you read this book, you're going to see some of the same stuff that you're going to run into, some of the trials and tribulations you're going to run into. I mean, back then there wasn't all the issues with music on, your music's out there, but you're not getting paid for it. But there still today are the issues of infighting in a band, the egos, to a certain point, drugs. Music industry is littered with stories about that. Trucks that break down, bad equipment, bad management, record companies that sign you to a deal. You think, I'm there, and then suddenly the record company folds, or they don't live up to their side of the bargain. So that's one of the themes in the book, for sure.
Do they talk about these events in their lives with nostalgia, with a certain amount of nostalgia and a good feeling, or do they talk about it from this place of, I don't want to, bitterness is maybe a little bit too strong, but a place of just, it's not what we expected it to be?
There are some ill feelings in a lot of the brains of a lot of these people.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, because I mean, for example, a band called the Rays out of Kitchener, Toronto area, Robbie and Cheryl Ray. They had a song, this is interesting, so they had a song come out and it shoots up the charts. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was supposed to be 34, or no, that wouldn't add up. Anyway, it was reversed. So when it comes out, it's supposed to be like 23 and it's 32, so it lost a pile of ground on the charts.
Right.
And it never.
And I guess money is tied to that, right?
So,
how high you are on the charts.
Basically, it was supposed to be like number 15, it was number 51.
Right.
By a clerical error.
Right.
So, you have bitterness about stuff like that, but you have, I think Randy Bachman or any of these guys would have, of the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive, would tell you the same stuff.
I would definitely know that group.
Great guy. And just, you put your trust. I mean, John Fogerty, if you read his book of Creedence Clearwater Revival, that guy is massive. He got completely burned by his record company.
Is that right?
All the songs that he had out in the old days, like Susie Q and all, he didn't get any money. So, to a microcosm story in Canada, same sort of thing in a lot of cases. Is there bitterness? There is, but there's also some great memories of some of these guys were, they were stars. I mean, and maybe only in Toronto, but some of them went on to L.A. and all around the world. And there are stories in the book about some great success, but also some sad stories about bad deals.
Bad deals,
bad deals, and and band infighting. Like one band, the Last Words from Toronto, I think they went on to become Janis Joplin's backup group.
Okay.
They wanted to go big in the States, and a couple of guys said, "No, I'd rather. I'm a daddy now. I'm staying home." So the band would break up. So the head guy wanted to go somewhere. A couple other guys didn't. What are you going to do, right?
Right.
So there'd be a little bitterness over that too.
Wow. It must have been, how did you feel listening to all these stories? I'm sure many of these people...
Privileged.
Yeah.
How many people get a chance to talk to people who like Denny Doherty, the Mamas and Papas?
Yeah.
The drummer for Santana was a guy from London, Ontario. How many people get a chance to sit down and hear their stories? I was really happy to have been able to do that. You just turn down the tape recorder, let it go, and it's amazing stuff. Yeah.
Well, you're capturing a moment in time.
Yep, that's it.
When you're sitting down with these individuals, I'm sure some of them were perhaps your idols, people that you respected.
They were.
And and to be in their presence and to hear hear their stories. Were they forthcoming? Did you find, because these kinds of books? I mean, obviously you rely on the subject that you're interviewing, them being forthcoming with the information.
Oh, very much so.
Because otherwise it becomes a very bland, kind of dry read.
At that point, in '86 to '90, when we did the interviews and then updated them more recently, they were just turn on the tape and let them go. Only two or three people didn't really want to talk.
Yeah.
Like Denny Doherty, I talked to him 3 times. Bobby Curtola 3 or 4 times.
I remember that name.
Les
Bobby
Emerson,
Curtola. Yeah, Les Emerson as well.
You'd have a beer with him the odd time. He'd tell me great stories about record royalties and just privileged, and they all no problem chatting for sure.
Well, you're the scribe.
Yep,
in a way, you're the scribe of the moment, capturing what is an important part of also Canadian history. Yeah, and actually, I agree with you that how you position your books and the label that's attached to your book really has a great deal to do with how it's received and how it's perceived.
Yeah,
and so this word trivia has this connotation perhaps of being too easily dismissed as not a serious book, not a seriously researched book.
I gave a recent presentation. You thought you might want to talk a little bit about publicity.
Yeah, I do actually, because you are a publicist, and this is a whole big branch that I'm not sure we're going to have a lot of time for, but publicity in this day and age, especially for whether you're an established author or whether you're an up-and-coming author, is something that they need to be aware of. So
a prelude to the discussion of that would be, I've written 10 books now, co-written 10 books, and you sort of get hardened. I don't write a book now necessarily to just because there's a story that has to be told. It becomes economic. Like if I'm going to put a lot of time and I want to make some money,
yes,
and call me a capitalist, whatever. But I've never, it's a labor of love. But I think you deserve to be paid, for your hard work, right?
Right.
So back up a sec here. I think if you're going to write a book, you got to be passionate about the topic, but you have to think that it's going to sell. I'm not going to write a book that's going to sell 50 copies. I mean, why would I? I'm not going to spend a year I want to make some money.
Especially when it's so research intensive.
Exactly.
I can get that. I understand that. Yeah.
So now, you've now got the book in hand, and the latest book self-published. Publicity is a real challenge. So my recent talk to the Ottawa Independent Writers, I thought I would spend most of the night discussing the new publicity, internet and Facebook and all that stuff. But as a matter of fact, most of the publicity we've got for the new book has been traditional TV, radio, newspapers.
Is that right?
Yeah. Now, not that it's helping sell a lot of books.
Right.
But I think you've got to do that. You've got to find a person like yourself and go to them with a very tight, simple explanation about why I should be on your show or in your paper or on your on the radio.
Yes.
A good pitch, good solid pitch.
That's having a good pitch in itself is a work of art, because knowing as the author sometimes you're too close to your words, you're too close to the work, you're very attached to your words, and you want to tell the world everything about it, thinking it's all about you, without necessarily understanding what's in it for the interviewer.
Well, the simple analogy I give about publicity is you're going fishing, right?
You're going fishing.
So here's a lake.
Okay.
Here's a lake.
Yes.
And here's you in the boat. So you have to put good bait on the hook. But if you drop the bait where there's no fish, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
So that's what a good publicist or a good author will do. They'll find out where the fish are, and they'll drop the bait, the good bait, which is a good pitch, right where the fish are. And then you're going to bring a few into the boat.
So what's good bait? What makes up good bait I'm sure that there are specifics that you have to think about.
Bait,
what's good bait overall if somebody's looking to get onto media?
So the new book, as the years go by, it's a hook. We call it a hook and angle, right? It's Canada's 150th birthday now.
Yep.
So we thought this is a good book to bring out. Music is a huge part of Canadian culture, so that's part of our hook. The other thing is, if you're pitching to Ottawa media, give them Ottawa stuff.
Okay,
right?
That's
pitching
a good...
to Edmonton media, give them Edmonton stuff. Because generally speaking, I've been turned down by a couple of radio stations, Hamilton, Ontario. There's nobody from Hamilton in the book. Well, they didn't read my pitch enough. Right. But there are Hamilton people in the book. So you've got to give them something that's relevant to their audience.
Right. to the market that you're in, obviously. 'Cause
Exactly.
this is and so an internet would be a completely different ballgame. How you market
Yeah,
on,
and I wouldn't
on the
pitch this
internet.
book about 50s and 60s,
Right.
70s music to a teen magazine because they don't
Right.
care, right?
So you have to do your
It's
research.
pretty common. It's common sense.
Yeah.
It's common sense.
You know what I do love about as years go by is that it's as if it's not as if you have followed a passion as well. You know, obviously you love music. It's something that you wrote a column about 25 years ago, and for me, following your passion and writing about what you're passionate about is an important part of being a writer.
It's huge.
Do you want to talk to me a little bit? We have almost 2 minutes left.
Okay, well,
following?
I covered politics for 3 years at Parliament Hill.
Yeah.
I would not write a book about Brian Mulroney. I'm not passionate about it. But while I'm there at Parliament Hill, I covered GST and all that stuff and the arrival of and free trade, Meech Lake Accord. While I'm there, I was doing this music column, and that was sort of a diversion for me from like I like politics, but I needed to get away from it. So I love music. For example, yesterday I went to Value Village looking for a picture frame, and I found an album by Lucille Starr, who did the song, the French song. I went home and I played it immediately, and I did some posting,
Facebook
I saw
stuff.
Yeah.
I saw it.
So I mean, you got to love what you're writing about. You got to get it in your teeth and not let go, and just forge on and don't stop until you get it finished. Your passion's huge.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, you know, thank you so much. Would you believe that our time is actually up? I do want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your passion for trivia, for Canadiana, for all things that touch Canadian, are part of our common Canadian history.
You mentioned my website on the...
Yes.
So you can buy our books at www.triviaguys.com or just find out more stuff about what we do.
Terrific. Thanks so much again for coming on the show, Randy Ray. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Author's Journey. Bye for now.